I credit Spencer Cox for having the vision to say, let's see if we can in our next upcoming budget give our teachers some bonuses. I know his proposal had bonuses to all school districts.
That was Governor Gary Herbert at his monthly press conference at PBS Utah, talking about the bonuses for teachers working during the pandemic. Governor Herbert said he hadn't talked to leaders of the legislature to find out why they would exclude Salt Lake City School District from the bonuses. Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on Salt Lake teachers and COVID-19 hazard pay. Yesterday, the majority leadership in the House announced that they would be paying out $1,500 bonuses for teachers working during the pandemic. However, they decided to possibly exclude Salt Lake City School District because they were completely online. Earlier today, we spoke with Representative Brad Lass, who is the Executive Appropriations Chair for the Utah House of Representatives. He was part of the discussion on creating these bonuses. Take a look.
Representative Lass, thanks for joining us on the show tonight. We want to start with the idea of giving teachers a stipend as hazard pay. How did the idea come about, and what prompted lawmakers to offer this in the first place?
Yeah, well, as we started looking at the revenue numbers, they were coming in pretty strong, and we started to talk about ways that we could spend that extra money. You know, that's something legislators like to talk about. And from the very beginning, teachers were number one on the list. We know that this has been a crazy year, that they've been making incredible efforts to educate our kids. But as the conversation expanded, we realized we need to do something not just for the teachers, but for everybody in schools. The janitors, the bus drivers, the secretaries, the classroom aides, because these people have all pulled together to make sure that our students, the children in this state, have had an educational opportunity. And so that was a pretty easy decision, really, when we saw the revenue numbers coming in.
How did lawmakers settle on the amount of $1,500 for teachers and $1,000 for staff and administrators?
Well, it really just comes down to the math. There's about 65,000 employees in the state that fit into this category in public education. And we knew about how much money we could spend on this, and we just started doing the math. It turned out to be about $1,500 for the teachers and $1,000 for everybody else.
Let's talk about the thought process to exempt Salt Lake City School District from the bonus. How did that come up, and why was it important to make the distinction between the fully online teaching versus a hybrid or fully in-person teaching?
Well, first of all, I want to say to you and to all of the teachers in the Salt Lake School District, this is not about you. We love you just as much as we love all of the teachers throughout the state. This is really about administrative decisions that have been made. And the reality of it is that the students in the Salt Lake District are challenged right now. Perhaps many of you saw the article in the Tribune on December 5th, I believe it was, that said that the numbers of students failing in the district is up by 600%. That's failing at least one class. And we believe that there are thousands of students who are just lost. They're not logging in. We don't know where they are. They very well may be at home, but we don't know that. And so we feel like these students are not getting a good educational opportunity. And that's the reason that this is happening. And it's not about the teachers. As for the second part of your question, which is why is it important to distinguish between the fully online schools, there are schools in the state that are designed to be online only. And we have students and parents that are making that choice. And these schools are under a lot of pressure this year too, because a lot of students have transferred to those schools. And so the teachers are grading more tests, they're reading more English papers, they're communicating with more students and more parents. And so we don't want to penalize those teachers who are in those environments that are intended to be online only.
We are seeing the argument that teachers didn't have the option to choose whether they would teach online or in person in the Salt Lake City School District. We see comments saying that teachers in the district are being punished. What would you say in response to that?
Well, I guess if we're talking about who's being punished, I think we have to think about the students. In my opinion, the students are the unfortunate ones that are being punished right now. And the teachers, as you suggested, didn't have anything to do with this decision. They're doing the very best they can under very trying circumstances. And so again, my heart goes out to the teachers in the Salt Lake District and we're not trying to punish you. If we were punishing the Salt Lake District or the teachers, we would simply say, you're not going to get this money because you didn't have live classes during this period of time. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, here's a pot of money, here's what we expect. If you start the in-person classes, you can have the money. So it's not about punishment, it is about incenting behavior.
How do you view the balance between learning on one side and then health and safety on the other side in Utah?
Well, as legislators, we're always balancing a lot of things. In this particular case, I think what we have to do is look at the best information that we have. The CDC came to us in October and said, we believe the best place for these students to be is in the classroom. And at least in the classroom, there are some controls. You know, you've got a teacher that can encourage the students to keep a mask on. You've got hand sanitizer, hand washing, wiping the desks down several times a day. And outside of that environment, who knows what's going on? And I would say in Salt Lake County, the transmission rate is still very high, and school has not been in session. So the transmission must be happening somewhere other than schools. So in 26 districts throughout the state that have high transmission rates, just like Salt Lake does, we have in-person school. And we believe that Salt Lake can figure out a way to do it. We hope that this provides a nice incentive for them to do just that.
All right, you've been hearing from Representative Brad Last. Representative, thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate you being part of the conversation.
Thank you.
A lot of people are looking at it as a bonus, but I'm actually looking at it as a reimbursement for the time and effort they've made to adjust to COVID.
That was Senator Stuart Adams, president of the Senate, talking yesterday about the $1,500 bonuses for teachers working during the pandemic. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight. Now, the budget still has to go through the legislature, and the expenditures still need to be approved. Joining us now is Representative Brian King, the House Minority Leader. Representative King, thanks for joining us tonight for the discussion.
You bet, Rosie.
Can you talk about your initial thoughts when you first heard about the proposed stipend?
Well, I was thrilled. I thought it was a great move on the part of the legislative leadership, and we as Democrats supported it entirely. These are a group of professionals that have worked for many, many years, if anything underpaid, and we depend on them so much. We rely on their good faith and their best efforts to make sure that we have our kids being taught to the highest level possible and that we have the best quality of life here in Utah. And we haven't always been able to pay them, I think, what they've warranted, what they've earned, but this was a nice gesture, and more than a gesture, it was a nice amount of money to put in their pockets during very difficult times.
In your opinion, if this stipend is considered COVID-19 hazard pay, should teachers who were teaching online qualify for this stipend?
Well, you characterize it as hazard pay, and for those who come in contact with others in the classroom, with the students in the classroom, it certainly is hazard pay. But even for individuals who are working online, this is a very challenging environment to try and do their jobs well and to teach their kids effectively, their students effectively, when they're just doing it online. So I think it's not just hazard pay, I think it's a recognition of the challenges, the unique challenges that COVID puts in place for any teacher to do their job well from a professional perspective. So I just think it's an acknowledgement that we're really asking them to do something that's very difficult during very challenging times.
What about the other people who would be covered under this stipend, such as bus drivers, custodians, secretaries? Do you think they should be included also?
Yeah, I do, largely because in the past we've, if anything, underpaid these folks who have been working so hard with relatively low pay compared to a lot of other things they could be doing. So I think it's a small recognition that we value their services. They're essential workers in terms of making sure that our kids get educated the way that we want. So it doesn't trouble me at all to have them provided some. They get $1,000 rather than the $1,500, so it's a little less money, but I certainly think it's well deserved.
Do you know if this type of reasoning has been applied to other government agencies, such as public-facing people working in government getting hazard pay versus others in their department who may be working in safer environments?
Well, you can make all sorts of distinctions like this. I thought Representative Last in your last segment put it well when he said, you know, we have to make choices about what to do with a certain amount of money. We made a deal basically with the education community in the last legislative session where we said if we're going to remove the constitutional guarantee of funding, or we're going to expand that constitutional guarantee to for income tax revenue to be used for something above and beyond higher education and public education, we will promise you that we will do a better job from a legislative perspective in funding at higher levels public education. And I think this was part of that. I think you have to look at this money that was paid and tie it back into the arrangement that we agreed to with the education community in the 2020 session. Then right after that session, of course, COVID hit and we had to back off those promises about how well they were going to be funded. So I think this is just backfilling those promises. What we did yesterday is just a backfill of those promises that we made during the session, and then COVID prevented us from following through at that time.
Now there's a number of people who are upset about the possibility that teachers in the Salt Lake City School District could be excluded from this stipend. There's outrage. Some feel like they're attacked, it's disrespectful, it's unfair. What's your take on this?
Well, I have heard from from teachers and from non-teachers, from families, from parents, both inside the Salt Lake City School District and outside. I actually represent a part of the state that is outside Salt Lake City School District. I represent a portion of Park City School District. So I think the feeling is whether you're in Salt Lake City School District or not, or whether you're a teacher or not, there ought to be fairness. There ought to be an even-handed approach. And if there are grievances about what the Salt Lake City Board of Education, the school district's Board of Education, has chosen to do in terms of not providing an option for in-person learning, we shouldn't take that out on the teachers. We should have some other way of incentivizing them to do what we think is best from a legislative perspective. Or better yet, in some ways, we shouldn't micromanage that decision from the legislative perspective, is my thought.
All right, we have time for one more question. What do you think will happen with this stipend? Do you think it's going to pass as written?
It's not written in such a way that it makes clear that it will necessarily preclude those stipends from being paid. Salt Lake City School District could take some steps between now and January 19th when our session starts to address the concerns that the legislature has put in place, or conversely, they can put in front of us information that shows we already are providing in-person learning for a wide variety of students who have special needs and for whom we think that's best. So my hope is that the Salt Lake City School District acts in a way that recognizes the best evidence across the country and the world in terms of how to best educate our kids. My personal preference would be that we do expand the opportunities for in-person education within the school district, but it's a school district decision, it's not a legislative decision.
All right, you've been hearing from Representative Brian King. Representative, we appreciate you so much for being here to participate in the discussion.
Thank you, Rosie.
Teachers are working under the system that the board voted for, and so it might feel a little bit unfair to punish teachers for something they didn't themselves vote for.
That was Yandere Chatwin, the spokesperson for the Salt Lake City School District, talking yesterday about teachers in the Salt Lake City School District being excluded from bonus checks for working during the pandemic. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on the Salt Lake City School District teachers and COVID-19 hazard pay. Joining us live via Zoom now is Melissa Ford, the president of the Salt Lake City School Board. Melissa, thank you for being with us tonight and welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Melissa, let's start at the beginning. So tell us what your initial thoughts were when you heard about the proposed stipend for teachers.
Well, I think the stipend is a wonderful idea, and I'm really happy with the legislative motion to reward teachers for the hard work they've been doing. Of course, it was followed by disappointment, upset, sort of frustration that the hard work of the Salt Lake City School District teachers is not being respected in that motion. I know how hard our teachers have been working, and I have had a front row seat to that. And I do feel like that they are well deserving of the stipend.
Now, the board also decided to move back to in-person learning starting in January 2021. Do you know if that's going to change things in regards to the stipend?
Yeah, the board's been always committed to finding opportunities for our students to be in the buildings. We committed right at the beginning to have our students back in classrooms in person as soon as we felt like it was safe in our community to do that, and a commitment to follow data and information as we learn it and be flexible in that process. And so, as you stated, we've already committed to bringing elementary school students back in January, and we're following the data as well, of the vaccine, of how our students are learning, and remain committed to doing everything we can to provide the top-notch education that our students in Salt Lake deserve, and that our teachers are working so hard to deliver to our students.
Now,
I'm proud of the work they're doing.
according to the legislative leaders who suggested the stipend in the first place, their reasoning were that teachers who had face-to-face contact with students increased the risk of getting COVID-19, and that's why they qualified for hazard pay. What's your thought about that line of reasoning?
I would love for legislators to come see what education looks like in the Salt Lake City School District, and I would like them to see how hard our employees and teachers are working. We have child nutrition workers who've been working nearly nonstop since the pandemic started in March, and teachers who've committed lots of extra time of their own to do training and learning, professional development to prepare for online learning. If you walk into our buildings right now, you'll see students. There are small groups of children that are learning in the building because that's something that they need. And as we are working through the data and information that we've got, we're looking to expand those opportunities for students and just make sure that we're giving them everything that they need. The students are our top priority.
Now, I know you can't speak on behalf of everyone. What have you been hearing as far as response from teachers about this announcement?
Well, I think teachers are upset. Everybody's been working so hard, and it's been a challenging time, and they've created an online system that I think will benefit our students well into the future, and they should be credited for that. It's been a daunting challenge, a stressful time, and this stipend from the legislature would go a long way to recognizing their work.
Now we have time for one more question. I'm wondering, are there any plans for the school district or the board to talk to legislatures as they finalize this plan? And is there anything you'd like to say to them if they may be watching this show tonight?
Yeah, I'd actually really like to start by thanking them for the commitment to funding education at that 6% increase. I would like to thank them for this stipend. And then I'd like to make sure they understand exactly what our Salt Lake City School employees have been doing. I would like them to understand what the work looks like in Salt Lake. I would like them to see our teachers and to see what a classroom looks like, to know just the high quality of work that's happening here. You know, whether our teachers have been working in person or online, every educator in our district, every employee in our district has gone above and beyond to continue serving students through this pandemic.